Yeah, that's how I got.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. We are allowing a few minutes for everybody to get into the webinar, but welcome. Glad you're here. If your microphone's on, we ask for you to mute that at this time. We are recording this webinar and we will have a question and answer at the end, but we're going to give everybody just a few minutes to log in. But welcome to our webinar. Well, good afternoon. We want to welcome everyone to the Building a Competitive Compensation webinar. My name is Rob Fox. I serve as president of Church Benefits Board, and I'm joined today by my colleagues, Jennifer Clore, she's vice president of operations, Nicole Averett, who's our director of benefits, and Beth Jones, who's our director of marketing and communication. Thank you all for joining us today as we discuss a topic that is so important for ministers and churches. Today's webinar is about taking an intentional approach to compensation and benefits. And this is so important as it relates to our goal of the professionalization of clergy and recruiting and retaining individuals who serve your church. Next slide, please. Today, we're going to be covering lots of information. So there may be some things that you know, there may be some items that are new to you. So feel free to take notes. We're also recording this webinar for you to review after the session, and we will stop the recording at the end and be hosting a question and answer at the conclusion. This is also very important for everyone to know that we are offering you education and not advice today. So we encourage you to visit with a financial planner or your tax professional if you have any specific financial or tax advice that you'll be seeking. And with that being said, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Jenny Clore.
Great. Thank you so much, Rob. So we're going to start talking about a practice that many of you may be familiar with, that I could probably venture to guess half of you maybe are doing at your church. It's called the lump sum approach. I like to call this the you figure it out approach. And this is when churches or committees, they give their minister or new staff member their total compensation number, which includes their salary, their benefits, and reimbursable expenses, and then has them figure it out. What do you want for retirement? What do you want for health insurance? And we just wanted to take a moment to talk through why this doesn't work. It really tends to be a misrepresentation of what the take-home pay is for the minister or staff member. So I want you to take a moment and think with me. You just hired your new minister. They are in their office, putting their books on their new bookshelf, and they're like, oh, I need to go talk to the financial administrator and get a few things tied up. So they say, go out to Sally, and they say, Sally, I need to get enrolled in the health insurance. How do I do that? And she was like, oh, you take that out. You do that on your own, and you take that out of your total salary. And they're like, okay, well, what about my retirement? How much is the church going to be sending to retirement? She's like, no, you figure that out too. That comes out of your total compensation. So you can imagine the surprise that this minister is now realizing that what they thought was an 80,000 compensation package is really dwindling closer to 40 to 60, depending on what they need. And it really puts ministers in a tough position to really forfeit important long-term financial planning things for them so that they can bring home a reasonable salary. So we just want everyone to think about that as how you approach that lump sum as you're hiring on new ministers. And I'd like to just ask a question to you. In your job, have you ever been asked to take your health insurance out of your salary? Have you ever been asked or told to take your retirement out of your salary? I think we all can say the answer is no. And so here at Church Benefits Board, we are really passionate about helping professionalize how we pay clergy and working with churches to figure out how to do that in the best way. And just a quick reminder, everybody, if you could mute your microphone if it's on. Okay. I'm going to hand it over to Nicole.
Thank you, Jenny. When most people think of compensation, they think salary, they think a paycheck. But a full compensation package is more than that. It includes direct income, benefits, and reimbursable expenses. Direct income is the portion you're paid directly. That includes salary and housing allowance, and a SECA offset for ministers who pay both sides of Social Security. These pieces together make up your total income compensation. The next section is the benefits package. These are not considered compensation, but are just as valuable. They include retirement, life insurance, health insurance, and ancillary benefits like dental or vision. Think of these as long-term support for financial and physical well-being. They don't show up in a paycheck, but they absolutely matter to your employee. Finally, reimbursable expenses, things like continuing education, conferences, and books, they aren't income, they're investments in your employees' growth and ministry effectiveness. So together, direct income and benefits package make up a total compensation package. It's more than just a paycheck. It's a partnership designed to support an employee now and for their future. And next slide. As we just discussed, direct income is the part of compensation that appears on a paycheck. First, the salary. It's the employee's base pay. It's their taxable income. Next, the housing allowance. For ministers, this portion is not taxable. It's a unique part of a minister's compensation that helps cover living expenses. Finally, the SECA offset. Ministers pay both the employee and the employer portions of Social Security and Medicare, which adds up to 15.3%. The church may reimburse for part of that, which is taxable, but helps offset your extra tax responsibility. I am now going to hand it back over to Jenny, and she'll walk through salary and housing allowance in more detail.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole. So we're going to talk about salary and housing. The church is in charge of determining what the salary is for the minister's position. And then it is the minister's responsibility to determine of that amount, how much do they want to claim as housing. So for example, you have a minister coming in, 60,000 is the salary, then they get to determine how much of that they want is housing. So in this example, they've chosen 35,000. So 35,000 is the non-taxable income and 25,000 is the taxable salary, which gives them the total of the 60,000 salary. Now, again, it's the minister's responsibility to work with the local CPA that understands housing allowance and determine what is best for them based on where they live and these three items. We just wanted to show you how ministers figure this out. But again, this is their responsibility, not the church's responsibility. So they're going to if they're going to choose housing allowance to be the lesser of one of these three things: the fair market rental value of their furnished home, including utilities, the amount officially designated in advance by the church, and we're going to talk about this later on the next slide, and then their actual eligible expenses incurred for housing. So that's their responsibility. Now it's the church's responsibility that every year you take the number that the church or that the minister has decided for housing and you approve it as a church. Typically, churches will incorporate this into their budget planning for the year. So they have the minister figure out that number each year and they approve it along with the budget. So this is something that is so important for churches to do every year prior to the housing allowance being distributed. We have a sample letter in our minister's compensation guide that we'll be sending out along with the recording. So that's something you guys can look at along the way. Now I'm going to hand it over to Rob to talk about the most fun thing, taxes. And you're muted, Rob. Sorry.
Thank you, Jenny. This is a very exciting topic, taxes for ministry leaders here. So I want to bring your attention to the coin that is up in the corner of the slide, the right-hand corner. You may know this. This is Janus, the ancient Roman god of beginnings, endings, and transition, who's often depicted with two faces to symbolize the ability to look forward and backwards. January is named after this ancient Roman god. But the reason we have it in this slide deck is because this is a metaphor for how the federal government looks at ministers who are serving in churches and nonprofits in the United States. It's a simple way to remember that ministers have a dual tax status. So ministers are employees for federal income tax purposes, but they are considered self-employed for Social Security and Medicare tax purposes. What this means is that ministers are subject to what is Self-Employment Contributions Act tax, or what Nicole's been talking about already, the SECA tax, instead of the Federal Insurance Contributions Act tax, or FICA tax. Next slide, please. So let's take a more specific look at what this means. So this chart is comparing what we might call a regular employee, a FICA employee, to a minister who is subject to SECA tax. You can look through here. This example is a $59,000 taxable income for both, but you'll see that the employer under the regular employee pays FICA at 7.65%. So that regular employee at $4,513.50. You'll also see that the employee pays the same. However, you'll notice that the minister is paying double with the SECA tax at 15.3% at $9,027. So the bottom line here, as we look at this example, is a regular employee gets their employer to cover half of the FICA, but the minister is responsible for paying all of the SECA tax. Next slide, please. So some of you who are out there in churches, you may be thinking, like some of the churches we talk with, well, that's not fair to the minister, right? And for those of you who think that way, you have the ability as a church to offer what's called a SECA offset. So a SECA offset is an option that the church may choose to pay the minister an additional 7.65% in taxable income, since they're already used to paying that expense for regular W-2 employees as FICA. So I'll give you a quick example or story. So when I finished seminary, the first church that I served, they offered me a SECA offset, additional taxable income at 7.65%. This was great news, except I was a young person then. I did not save that money to pay my taxes. I just went ahead and spent it. So needless to say, it was not a good day the next year when my wife and I got our tax bill, because we got a huge tax bill and we did not set aside those SECA offset funds for our taxes. So what I should have done is withheld additional income with the church to pay those taxes or paid those quarterly. Simply put, though, here, the lesson is the SECA offset is an option for your church to offer this additional taxable income, usually at 7.65% to your ordained ministerial employees, to help them with this additional cost. With that, let me hand it over to my colleague, Nicole Avery. Nicole, you're on mute.
Thank you, Rob. Now let's talk about the next piece of a compensation package, the benefits package. Again, unlike direct income, these benefits don't show up as pay, but they add significant value to your overall financial security and well-being. Retirement includes employer basic contributions, an employer match if your employee contributes, and the employee's salary deferral. The employer basic contribution is calculated based on the employee's total compensation, including both taxable salary and housing allowance. The employer match and the employee's salary deferral, however, are calculated only on the taxable portion of income. Medical coverage varies by church size. For large churches, there's a group plan. Smaller churches might use a marketplace or an ICHRA. Then there's life and disability benefits. That's your life insurance, long-term and short-term disabilities. They provide protection for the employee and their family if the unexpected were to happen. And then your ancillary benefits like vision and dental help cover routine care without out-of-pocket surprises. Finally, paid time off, vacation, sick leave, paid holidays, plus sabbaticals, study leave, even bereavement leave. These allow your employee to rest, to recharge, and to continue serving effectively. Next slide, please. Now we're going to focus on retirement, which is the key part of supporting an employee's long-term financial security. The goal is to structure contributions so your employee can save roughly 18 to 20% of their pay toward retirement. The total comes from three sources. It comes from your employer basic contributions, your employer matching contributions, and the employee's own salary deferral. The employer basic contributions go in regardless of whether the employee contributes, while the match only applies if the employee chooses to defer a portion of their salary. Together with the employee's own deferral, these three sources reach the target's their saving goal. For example, 10% from an employer basic contribution, 5% from the employer match, and 5% from the employee's own deferral adds up to 20%, which is right in the suggested range. This shows how all three pieces work together to reach the goal efficiently. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Jenny to talk about medical and ancillary insurance.
Thanks, Nicole. This is probably, we know one piece of benefits that is always a struggle for churches and how to provide for their staff. So Church Benefits Board partners with Hill Group, Owen Smith, who works contextually with your church to see exactly what you need. Most small employer plans, you have to have 2 eligible employees in order to offer a small employer plan. Then there's also the marketplace, where if you have only one individual, the marketplace is a great place to go. And then the ICHRA. This is a great acronym, Individual Coverage Health Reimbursement Arrangement. This is also, it's almost like a hybrid of a small employer plan and the marketplace together, so that your employees are getting that pre-tax premium benefit in addition to getting the coverage that they need as an individual. They get to choose it. So that's an option. And we have Owen Smith on standby to serve all of our churches to help answer any questions that you all may have about medical or dental vision insurance. We also have a webinar coming up next week on November 6th that we'd be happy and love for you guys to join if this is something that you have more questions about, and Owen will be our guest speaker for that. We're going to talk a little bit about the life and disability insurance options. So life insurance, obviously, this is just a practical way for the church to support a staff member's family in the unforeseen happenstance that that employee passes away. Disability is probably most likely to be used while your employee is employed with you, whether that be short-term or long-term disability. So these are 2 products that we offer through the Church Benefits Board. So we wanted to provide you with an overview of what's available with Church Benefits Board. We have an employer policy, which is paid by the church, and this includes 5 different products. It includes life insurance for your employee, 4 times their compensation, up to $500,000. Dependent life insurance, $10,000 for the spouse and $5,000 for any dependent under the age of 26. A long-term disability policy, 60% of earnings, accidental death and dismemberment, and we're excited to announce that in May 2026, we're going to be incorporating a short-term disability into this product with no extra premium. The cost will stay the same as it does now, but we know that that'll help people who just have any disability that lasts less than 12 weeks. So the cost of our employer policy is 2% of total compensation. So if you go back into what Nicole was talking about on her income slide, you're going to take everything listed in that income area, the salary, housing, SECA reimbursement, and multiply that by 2% to get what the premium would cost for the employer policy. And that's all bundled together. We're also excited to announce that starting January of 2026, we will be launching a personal life policy. This is employee paid, so it would be done through a salary deferral. through the employee's paycheck, and it's guaranteed coverage up to $200,000. It's a permanent policy, so it earns cash value, and they have it until they're 100 years old, and that it's portable after employment. So they have to be employed with the church in order to be eligible to enroll. But if they ever leave the church, either retirement or change employers, they're able to, it's portable and goes with them. And the cost of the employee, it's age-based premium. And this is something that if you have a younger minister or staff member on your staff, it's so important to encourage them to look at these types of insurance policies, because the younger that they can get into a personal life policy, the lower the premium will be for life. So it's just so important to have those conversations with your staff to see if it's something that they need to help them have a more robust insurance and financial picture. So Rob, are you going to let us know about paid time off?
Yeah, that's a tough act to follow, though, with all those exciting announcements. Thank you, Jenny. Well, this is everyone's favorite slide and benefit. It's paid time off. Now, I know when you see this, this might be self-explanatory, but it's really important for us to discuss PTO for a couple reasons. First, I hope you all learned in Sunday school what I learned, that God created the world in 6 days, and then God took a day off. We call it the Sabbath, and your minister needs one too. Your minister's Sabbath, though, will likely not be your Sabbath. So it's important to document this in your employee benefits package so that your minister actually takes that day off. Second, I can say this because I'm a minister. Ministers are notorious for not taking care of themselves. And having a written PTO policy with holidays, sick leave, bereavement time, professional development, vacation time, it allows you all who are leaders in your church to encourage the minister to take this time of rest and professional development that they so desperately need. And third, this is how you're going to recruit and retain the best called talent to your church. This written PTO policy shows that your church is being intentional about investing in the health and welfare of your ministerial leaders and their families. So it's a very important piece for you to write down and make happen. So, and with that, Jenny, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Rob. So we know that the discussing compensation is awkward and uncomfortable. So we wanted to give just a few things to keep in mind as you have these conversations with your staff and your ministers. You want to normalize the conversation, which means set up a reoccurring annual meeting to discuss compensation with your staff. Nobody wants to have that awkward responsibility or need to say to the finance chair, I think we need to talk about my compensation. So have it on the calendar so everyone knows that there's a time every year for you to discuss this. That's also a great time for the finance team and personnel committee to discuss a cost of living increase for your staff. So just normalize the conversation. Don't make someone have to bring it up. Set clear expectations. Have well-written job descriptions and clear agreed upon expectations. So we all know that there's job descriptions that probably are 20, 30, 40 years old. It's really important that your team and your personnel committees look at those and make sure they're being updated with really what's expected from the church for your staff. Know what's needed. The church and the staff member or minister, they need to know what they need financially. So the church needs to know this is the highest we can go, and the minister needs to go, this is the lowest I can accept to be able to provide for my family and feel valued as a minister. So that's that retained piece. And assume the best, unconditional positive regard. So when a new staff member is on board, new minister, I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase the honeymoon period of when a new minister comes on staff. For the first year, everything is great. Everyone's just so excited to have a pastor on staff and getting to know each other, taking them to lunch. It's wonderful. eventually, we all know honeymoon periods wear off, but it's important to always make sure that you are not assuming the worst when a staff member or minister asks a question about their compensation. Really, truly seek to understand what they're needing and what they're asking for. And lastly, use data. So talking about money is very emotional. So try to keep it as objective as possible. And here's a few ways to do that. Look at the type of education that you're requiring for the position and the education that your minister has. They most likely have a master's of divinity, so they have master's level degrees. So make sure you take that into consideration when you're building that compensation package for them. Look at the cost of living. Many churches have an expectation that their ministers live within a certain radius of the church. Now, if you're in the city, obviously that's going to be more expensive. So make sure your finance team is keeping that in mind as they are building that compensation package. And then compare. It doesn't hurt to pick up the phone or talk to somebody at a local congregation, even if they're a different denomination than yours, to see where their salary and benefits fall for their ministers in your local town. And look at other nonprofits or businesses that require the same level of education that you're asking for in your minister. If you're asking for a master's degree, then look at the superintendent, look at the nonprofit executive director. There are lots of different positions that also ask for that type of education that you can compare to. And this really helps you make sure you're building a compensation package that is relevant to where you live and what you're asking for and what your expectations are for that minister and staff member. Rob?
Excellent. Thank you, Jenny. So as we draw to a close, we kind of wrap a bow around this. We just want to reiterate a couple points here. I want to talk about recruit and retain one more time for your church. This is so important because it's about an intentional, written out salary and benefits package, and it's going to reflect the values of who you are as a congregation. So I want you to think with me for a moment about the cost of hiring a new employee. What does it take? Consider the time it takes for that search committee to get together, to review what could be hundreds of resumes, to discuss the possibilities, to late night meetings. It takes a lot of time. And then, as Jenny was just mentioning, consider the talent and the training of the people that you're considering. Many of the ministers that you all will consider will have up to almost decades of education, undergraduate, master's level, even doctoral degrees. And consider those years of ministerial service that they have and the experiences that they have. And then consider the treasure. What is the treasure that you're going to invest in moving this minister and family, and get them acclimated to your new community? If this is handled well through a thoughtful and written out compensation and benefits package, it really sets you on the right foot. It shows the intentionality of your church. It's going to help you to recruit and retain these ministers that you love so very much and keep them for the long haul. So next slide. So with that, we want to thank you all for attending today, for giving us your time here. And if you'd like more information about anything we've talked about today, all the services that we provide, please visit us online at churchbenefits.org.